Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome. So in this video, we are going to look at the relationship between sickle cell, genotype, and malaria. My name is Mukhtar Ali from Ikara. So let's look at from introduction. A sickle cell disease is a genetic blood disorder caused by mutations in the hemoglobin. So generally, sickle cell disease is actually a genetic disorder that can be inherited from father or from parent to their offspring. It can be inherited from sickle cell parent. It can be inherited from carrier of the disease. And this disease is actually as a result of a mutation in the hemoglobin gene. And I think for more detail on how the sickle cell affects hemoglobin, I'm going to draw a 10-minute video on how this mutation occur in the hemoglobin that lead to the sickle cell disease. So it's very, very important. I think you need to watch that video. And it's, of course, as a result of that mutation in the hemoglobin, because hemoglobin is a protein, so it leads to a coding of amino acid called valine, and that lead to the sickle shift of the red blood cell. So I'm going to actually share a link under the description or discussion box of this video, and then you can watch it for you to have details of what exactly the sickle cell anemia is. And malaria is a life-threatening disease caused by Plasmodium parasite transmitted through Anopheles mosquitoes. So malaria is actually one of the life-threatening disease that mostly found in Africa, and Nigeria was considered to have the highest malaria cases with about 25%. I think now the malaria cases in Nigeria is around 27%. So it means that for the whole malaria cases, about 10 to 25, 27% of the disease occurred in Nigeria. So we are actually at higher risks. We have the highest population with malaria, and this disease is transmitted by Anopheles mosquito. And this Plasmodium parasite, we have many of them, but in Africa, there are 5 major Plasmodium parasites that cause the disease, which include Plasmodium falciparum, Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malariae, Plasmodium ovale. But the Plasmodium falciparum is the most deadly and the most actually the most frequent parasite that found in Africa that cause malaria, especially in Nigeria. So understanding the relationship between these two conditions, that is the sickle cell disease and the malaria, is crucial for public health in malaria endemic region. So generally, malaria affect red blood cell. Sickle cell disease also it affects red blood cell. This is a sickle shaped red blood cell, as we can see clearly from here. This is a sickle shaped red blood cell. This one, but this is actually a normal red blood cell. So let's see how these associates. So the sickle cell disease is primarily manifest as two main genotypes. So generally, the sickle cell disease is found in homozygous. An individual with homozygous phenotype, that's hemoglobin SS. HB means hemoglobin, so it means hemoglobin SS, and it can also be found in an individual with hemoglobin AS, that is the carrier. So this is actually the carrier. This is actually an individual with the disease, and this is the carrier in the case of the hemoglobin AS. So an individual with hemoglobin SS typically experience severe health complications of the sickle. while an individual with hemoglobin S exhibit a milder symptoms of the disease. So how this disease actually occur in humans? So generally, let's assume you have a mother and the father, they are a carrier. This is actually the mother carrier, and this is the father carrier. So it means that the mother is AS, and then the father is also AS. The father is also AS. So what happened? So there is a likelihood that if this parent cross, you see, when you have, this is a normal A, so when normal A cross with another normal A, it is going to give a normal gene. So therefore, this child is going to be normal. While when the normal A here cross with the red here, so it means that it is going to be carrier. And also this one and this one is also going to be carrier. But if the S cross with another S, then it's going to give birth to a child. These parents are going to give birth to a child with sickle. So this one, that is why you see that the child has a disorder. It means that it carries the disease. So usually the A is a dominant, while S is the recessive. So when S and S cross, then it's going to have a child that have the sickle cell disease. So that is why actually when actually marrying, it is very, very important to know the genotype of your partner so that at least to prevent giving birth of a child with the disease, because sickle is one of the most actually complicated disease that I have ever seen in my life. So like, for example, the hemoglobin AA, like in the case of the first child here, it means that the child has hemoglobin AA genotype, so it's considered to be normal and does not provide any protective advantage against malaria. So it means that if you have hemoglobin AA, it means that you don't have any protective advantage against malaria. This indicate that an individual that has a normal hemoglobin, it means that they are more prone to malaria infection and malaria disease. So now, malaria impact on sickle cell carrier. So a sickle cell trait, hemoglobin AS, provide a selective advantage for malaria endemic areas by reducing the severity of malaria infections. So if you are individual with actually hemoglobin AS, it means that there is a likelihood that you are going to actually have a reduced severity of malaria infections. And research indicate that hemoglobin AS individuals have lower mortality rate from malaria compared to those with hemoglobin AA. Like about 28% of the malaria deaths are found in Nigeria, and studies have shown that those with hemoglobin AS, it means that they are less susceptible to malaria infection, and also they have lower mortality rates compared to those with hemoglobin AS. So the presence of sickle-shaped cell, the presence of the sickle-shaped red blood cell disrupt the life cycle of the malaria parasite within the blood stream. So generally, you know that the red blood cell is concave in shape. When in the case of sickle cell shaped red blood cell, the malaria parasite cannot actually proceed successfully to its life cycle in the case of the normal hemoglobin. In the case of normal hemoglobin, it can actually successfully complete its life cycle. But in the case of the sickle-shaped red blood cells, usually the life cycles of the malaria parasite is disrupted within the bloodstream. Like for example, this is actually this is the normal red blood cells, and this is the normal hemoglobin. But this is actually the sickle cell red blood cell, and this is the abnormal hemoglobin. So as a result of this sickle cell shape of the red blood cell, the malaria parasite cannot actually survive it, and they cannot actually complete its life cycle. So that is why within the red blood cells, the parasite will be destroyed. So now, what are the mechanisms of protection of this malaria? The sickle cell shaped red blood cells are less hospitable to Plasmodium parasite, limiting their ability to reproduce. So because the sickle shaped red blood cells is not actually a good home to accommodate Plasmodium parasite. And as a result of that, when the parasite found it safe in the sickle-shaped red blood cells, it cannot complete its life cycle. So as a result of that, the parasite cannot reproduce. So infected sickle cells are more likely to be cleared by the spleen, enhancing immune response. So most of the actually infected sickle shapes, they are more likely to be declared by the spleen. So a spleen is actually one of the organ of immune system where all those infected sickle cells, they can easily be cleared from the body so that to prevent or to clear all those cells that are already infected with the malaria parasite so that it will only left with the sickle celled red blood cells without the parasite in it. So you see, one of the very interesting things is that when actually someone with a sickle cell red blood cell is actually infected with the red blood cell, so all those infected sickle cell red blood cells, they will be cleared, they will be eliminated by spleen, and this enhance immune response. So this phenomenon contributes to a survival advantage in regions where malaria is prevalent. So for those that actually have a sickle cell red blood cells, it serves as like a survival advantage to them in the case of the malaria. So then what about the geographical distribution? So the prevalence of sickle cell traits and disease is notably high in sub-Saharan Africa, where malaria is endemic. So it has been actually reported that most of the peoples that have this sickle cell trait are highly found in sub-Saharan Africa, where where the malaria parasite or the malaria is endemic. So you see, this is how God actually want to see in any way. This is how God help humans with different strategies for survival. So you see, sickle cell disease is a disease that affects, and it's actually one of the most dangerous diseases, but they have advantage in the case of malaria. So the area with high malaria transmission rate show a higher frequency of hemoglobin AS genotype. So that is why the hemoglobin AS genotype is highly frequent in Nigeria and also other parts of the world. So with this, we'll understand that an individual with hemoglobin AS will be higher in Nigeria than any part of the world because Nigeria has the highest malaria cases. So therefore, it's actually a direct relationship. The higher the malaria transmission in a particular area, then the higher the hemoglobin AS genotype. So the geographical relationship underscores the evolutionary adaptation of population to combat disease. So Indiana Sickle Cell Data Collection Program, one of handful in the US, believed to be the only one incorporating data from statewide health information action. So identify cases that will not normally show up in resources used. Okay, this image is actually data that is collected from Indiana, where they were able to collect data for the relationship between sickle cell and malaria transmission. And they understand that, of course, the higher you have the malaria transmission, then the higher the population has or have hemoglobin AS. So public health concern, understanding the relationship between sickle cell and malaria can inform health intervention in endemic region. So strategy might include genetic counseling, of course, and screening programs for at-risk population. So educating communities about sickle cell disease protective effects can improve health outcomes and improve malaria prevention efforts. So this is actually, ladies and gentlemen, what we need to understand, that a public health concern, if you really educate the population or the communities about the relationship between this sickle cell and malaria, will definitely improve the health outcomes and inform malaria prevention efforts. So ladies and gentlemen, I think this is where we are going to stop, and I hope you will find this video very interesting. And please don't forget to subscribe and join my YouTube community. See you next, and bye bye.